Does Greta Thunberg use a smartphone? Welcome to the podcast, the Ronald Stein. Good afternoon.
Armando, glad to be aboard.
Excellent. Ronald, let me show your last article. This is the title that motivated this podcast today. Greta Thunberg's poster girl for the ignorance of elites who are using the products they want to ban. Ronald, let me remove this one. Based on this article, uh, with due all respect, what products made from petroleum derivatives does young Greta probably is using today?
What products is she not using today? She challenged the United Nations. How dare you? And everybody, I think most people don't know, nobody uses raw crude oil. Basically raw crude oil is black tar. It's useless unless you get manufactured into something usable. And over the last couple hundred years, through technology and innovation, we've been able to, break that crude oil into oil derivatives and to make like 6,000 products today that didn't exist 200 years ago. Fuels for different modes of transportation, ships, planes, cars, merchant ships. These didn't exist 200 years ago. And it's the people demanding the products and fuels made from crude oil. If we didn't have that demand, there'd be no need for crude oil. And that's where we are, because when she challenged the United Nations, how dare you, the statement should have been more accurately, Ms. Thunberg, how dare me for demanding the products and fuels manufactured from crude oil that makes my life more comfortable. That's the issue. Because if she didn't want oil, well, stop using the iPad, stop flying around, and everything else. I mean, it's kind of like there's almost nothing in this world in the developed countries that's not made from fossil fuels. And you want to get rid of fossil fuels? Great, stop using the products. There's no need for oil.
And Ronald, politicians and environmentalists, apparently they do not like to discuss this difference between products and fuels. Fuels for logistics, complex logistics using fluids,
Right.
fuels. Is it intentionally or ignorance?
I think it's total ignorance. Armando, for example, airports, 30, 40 years ago, airports were small. Now they're monstrous, more planes, and like I say, the amount of flights going out per day. And if you don't want crude oil, well, stop flying. Because, the refiner's not going to make fuel for nobody. They're making it for the demand. And, the supply-demand equation is a simple equation. If you have, a demand, you got to provide a supply. If you don't have the supply, then the prices go up. And so it's a precarious position to be in that, like I say, these refineries, they weren't needed 200 years ago. But now, with all the airports, we got, 50,000 military jets, we've got 20,000 commercial jets, we've got 50,000 merchant ships. And Armando, they're all using fuel to move products, and the products are made with fossil fuels. They might be made in a different country, and we use, jets and merchant ships to move it. Sometimes a merchant ship runs into a bridge in Baltimore, but it's amazing. All the products, like I say, they're not needed unless people demand them.
Yeah. And looking at the supply chain of minerals and metals, so China controls around 80% of supply of rare earths.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. To go green, we have the rare earth metals and minerals for EV batteries, wind turbines, solar panels. And China has a stranglehold like 80% of the global supply. And the Congo in Africa, they got a 90% source of the vital cobalt that's used for EV batteries. And so you have these developing countries like China and Africa that have no environmental laws, no labor laws. I mean, it's almost hypocritical to be an environmentalist and promote the environmental degradation in those developing countries, the humanity atrocities in those countries, and all in the effort to get rid of oil. While you're using all the pieces and parts and flying all over the world. And
Yeah.
no, it's an oxymoron to make that statement. So yeah, it's strange that developing countries are controlling the green movement of the wealthy countries.
Yeah, that's right. And these volumes tend to grow, of course, because the intention to grow the use of and what's the strategy for these rich countries, wealthy countries, or they do not have any strategy?
They don't have any. Like I say, if the costs are going up, I know in the case of electric vehicles, as we know, the elites have bought them. The elites will continue to buy them. But Armando, we've run out of elites. Now we're getting down to the common folk. And the common folk has, I think, an average debt of like $60,000 here in America between credit cards and mortgages and home loans and school loans. And so they're in debt to begin with, and they're not going to be the buyers. And if you force EVs onto them when they can't afford it, they'll be deeper in debt. And, of the more than 6 billion people on this planet that are living on less than $10 a day, they may never be in an automobile because the price of the automobile is getting further and further and further away. And so, yeah, the wealthy countries are trying to push it, but like you say, we've run out of elites.
Is something similar to the problem with uranium from Russia and oil from Saudi Arabia. So the dependence of other countries for wealthy countries.
It's kind of similar. You and I were both around during the oil embargo back in '73. Many people weren't, but back in '73, OPEC controlled a lot of the oil, and they shut the valve. It was devastating to the United States. Lines to get gasoline were just hours and days, and it was horrendous. That was in '73, and we have a similar situation, but it's a green movement now. Now, instead of OPEC controlling our quote energy, crude oil, we have China and Africa controlling the minerals and metals and cobalts that allows us to go green. Because if they decide to stop shipping it, our green movement comes to a halt.
Yeah. You mentioned in your article that every year approximately 2.5 billion tires are produced globally. And
Exactly, yeah.
are they manufactured by wind and solar? Or?
Oh, yes, of course. In fact, my neighbor just brought a Tesla truck, and I was admiring his electric, made
Yeah.
tires. They're huge.
But it's a big number, 2.5 billion tires.
Well, exactly. You remember there's at least four tires per vehicle. Bigger vehicles have more tires, and they wear out. And it's amazing. It's not only the tires; it's the vehicle itself, all the parts and components and electronics. I was looking at his Tesla truck, and it's 100% made with oil.
Yeah.
It has a battery. It runs on the battery, but if you didn't have the oil to make all the components and the insulation and the tires, there wouldn't be a vehicle. And so it's kind of strange. People want to get rid of oil, but they want to go green. Well, you can't do both. And when you take a look at electricity, the light bulb is made from oil. And all the electrical generating systems we have, we got many. You got coal, natural gas, nuclear, hydro. Now, those four provide continuous, uninterruptible electricity. Then you have two others. You got wind and solar provide electricity occasionally, whenever the wind's blowing and the sun's shining. All six of those electrical generating systems did not exist 200 years ago because all the parts for the computers, the insulation, all the components, all the parts are made with those fossil fuel derivatives. Until we can clone crude oil, we're lost. You get rid of crude oil, you get rid of all electricity. Wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, everything. And, all the vehicles go away. This conversation comes to an end because there'll be no iPads and iPhones. And yeah, it's a different world. And 200 years is not that long ago, but, most people obviously never lived 200 years ago. And yeah, most people only lived, our world leaders are probably like 70, 80, which is a lot less than 200. But yeah, they don't recognize this place was a different planet 200 years ago.
You mentioned that wind and solar sometimes are intermittent, are occasional, but in the north part of the country in Brazil is so strong and constant that they say that wind is not intermittent, it's a constant energy. How do you
Well,
see this?
I guess the only way I could explain that is if business would invest, then it's a good deal. But when you subsidize this, it's not a good deal. And to have continuous uninterruptible electricity, it's going to be out there all the time. I'm always amazed at the farce of the nameplate rating. We're going to put in 100 megawatts of wind turbines. Well, that's 100 megawatts when the wind's blowing. I want 100 megawatts annually, all the time, and they can't do that. And the business is not going to invest on that probability because it's a bad investment. So it's subsidized. All the wind and solar is subsidized. Same thing with the electric vehicles. It's subsidized because it's basically a bad deal.
You said something very interesting that I like it. I'm not pro fossil fuels, and that is my case. I'm not
Yeah.
pro oil, pro coal, or natural gas. I'm in favor of products that we are currently using, lean logistics, diversification, contingencies, low costs, access to more people. So, how do you see this fanatic people that are fanatic to wind, solar, or fanatic to oil? What, what's
Let's have a conversation because I was on a TV interview in New York, and yeah, ironically, the first question was, "Hey, Ron, we understand you're pro oil." I said, "Wait a minute, I'm not pro oil. I'm pro the products that we get from oil that's made life totally different the last 200 years. We now have hospitals, we got sanitation, we got communications, electronics, data centers, planes, trains. This didn't exist before we had those products from oil. And I'm not married to oil. You find a replacement, I'm all for it. But we've had 200 years to replace it, and we've been unable to. So the next best thing, well, we're going to replace it with wind and solar. Well, wait a minute. Wind and solar does something totally different. Wind and solar only can generate electricity. They can make nothing for society. And, when you take a look at everything that needs electricity, your iPhone, the data centers, the x-ray machines, the computers, is made from oil. So you get rid of oil without having a replacement, we're back to the pre-1800s. They had a zero emission society back then. Of course, people didn't live past 40 years of age. Life was hard. But yeah, that's where we want to go. And I would like to have a discussion. Before I jump out of the airplane without that parachute, I want to talk about it.
In your opinion, what's worse, CO2 and methane pollution from fossil or environmental impacts from renewable mining? What's worse?
Well, I think it's the environmental impacts because To me, environmentalists are hypocritical when they accept something out of sight is okay. The environmental degradation over there is okay. The humanity atrocities over there is okay. We're going green. I think that is atrocious. And when you take a look at the emissions, um, I guess I can blame the emissions for the world populating to 8 billion people. I could blame emissions for us now having a lot of transportation we didn't have 200 years ago. Yeah, the world is much, much better. And, like I say, CO2, we're trying to get CO2 level. I guess the environmentalists like to eliminate CO2, but we're already at a CO2 starvation point. We're like around 420 parts per million. You get down around 300 and life cannot exist. Well, that's a good way to clean the planet. Wipe everybody out.
The International Energy Agency is forcing the speech to against CO2 and methane. How do you see this agency doing this job?
Well, I see them just like the Department of Energy, um, not entering discussions. The DOE, when we had that oil embargo in 1973, the Department of Energy was formed. And their main mission was don't let this happen again, this oil embargo. Well, in 1973, let's take a look at California, where I am. We're the fourth largest economy in the world. And in 73, between California oil production and Alaska oil production, we met the demands of the state, 95% of the demands of the state. In California as a state, we relied on 5% for foreign oil. That was in 73. Well, 50 years have gone by. And now California is not dependent on foreign oil for 5%. We're dependent on foreign oil for more than 60%. We've gone the other direction. We're a national security risk for the entire country, being the fourth largest economy in the world. And take a look at the Department of Energy. I guess it's like any department in Washington. They've grown in 50 years. They now have 14,000 employees. They have an annual budget of $48 billion. And they've allowed California, like I said, their goal was don't let this happen again, this oil embargo potential. They've allowed California, the fourth largest economy in the world, to grow from 5 to more than 60% dependent on foreign oil. My question is, what are these 14,000 people doing?
Mhm. Yeah, interesting, interesting. How companies like Apple and other important companies that manufacture iPhones and iPads, how do they see this challenge? Because uh, they do not need only electricity to run their equipment. They need the product.
They need the components to build the data centers. They need the components to build the iPhones, to build the computers. They're following in this. They're drinking the same Kool-Aid as our policymakers. We're going to go green and rely on wind and solar to operate these data centers. Wait a minute, that ain't going to happen. That's like being in the operating room and the lights go out. you know, it's,
But they consider themselves they they auto consider like a sophisticated group of companies that are doing green.
they're very sophisticated, and they try and make business decisions based on business economics. And
Yeah.
their data centers are not subsidized, so they're going all in for the data centers. But I don't think they have any say as to where their electricity is coming from, because the state and the whole country here in America, we're shutting down natural gas and coal power plants and nuclear power plants, and that's the continuous electricity. And there's a lot of offshore wind turbines, but that doesn't help people in Nebraska too much.
Yeah, because Microsoft, Google, Apple, and other big companies, I suppose they are close to California or other states, but they are high consumers of energy.
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, without a doubt. All this electronic stuff is putting a huge demand. And with us going to artificial intelligence, there's going to be even a bigger growing demand
Bigger.
for electricity. And that electricity, it's got to be continuous electricity. And you can't substitute because, like I said, wind and solar, like I said, they do something totally different than oil. They only generate electricity. Oil is never used to generate electricity. But just like coal, natural gas, hydro, and nuclear, their electricity is different than wind and solar electricity because their electricity is continuous. We've gotten used to all electric, it's always continuous. Well, wind turbines, they're fine if the wind's blowing and no tornadoes, and solar panels work unless it's snowing. Where in Texas, they had a hailstorm that wiped out, thousands of solar panels. But yeah, it's like I said, we're almost comparing two types of electricity. You got continuous electricity and intermittent electricity, and you're saying, well, it's all the same. Well, it's not the same.
So the intermittent ones need batteries to store energy,
Yeah,
while
but
they are not.
going back to the batteries, what's it take to make a battery? You're back to the exotic minerals and metals to make the battery. And so
Yeah.
it's like I say, it's strange that most of the exotic minerals and metals and cobalts and lithiums are in developing countries. If they were in wealthy countries, Armando, it would be tremendously expensive to mine for it. Because now you want to mine for lithium in my backyard, where you're going to meet all the environmental regulations and you're going to adhere to the labor laws and the minimum wage laws. And all that exotic minerals and metals is going to be humongously expensive. And right now, most people can't afford an EV. And if you increase the price, they're definitely not going to afford the EV. So it's like I say, it's a sad situation we're in, but nobody wants to talk about it.
In the case of the United States, the state of California and the federal government are both aligned in the same concepts.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I hear Governor Newsom and President Biden, they're talking the same language. They don't know what they're talking about, but they're talking the same language.
Impressive. Impressive, because you do not have, let's see, con- contradictions or discussions or debates in
Exactly.
this time.
Right.
Impressive. Impressive. And other states are different. I mean, Texas, for instance, is things different.
No, not there's not too much difference. It's all the same. The green movement has gotten everybody's attention, and that's why Greta Thunberg, like I say, she's the poster child. She says, "How dare you?" and everybody's on board. But like I say, she couldn't be where she's at without fossil fuels, and she's using fossil fuels to promote her campaign.
Yeah. But in terms of total energy, let's see, electricity used, uh, 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 in Texas, for instance, wind and solar are participating with a big part nowadays. No.
Well, they have more capacity, but you need a huge amount of capacity to get some continuous electricity. Yeah, the wind might be blowing here, but it's not blowing there. So you're going to get some electricity being generated. But when you talk about the total, quote, quote, megawatts of installed potential, it ain't there. Because, like I say, wind and solar basically do not work most of the time.
Yeah, it fails. It's not constant. Yeah, that's true. So, for the conclusion, I would like to ask you a question, a very tricky question, and
Okay.
maybe, does Greta use an iPhone or a Samsung?
She probably has both. she has the latest iPhone because she's not going to use something from the dark ages.
But she is influenced by people, reliable people. So why is she doing this? Let's see, statements.
I think she likes the notoriety. Does she know what she's saying by, how dare you, when she's the cause of it? Not she personally, but, she represents, one of the, 6% of the world in wealthy countries that keeps demanding these products. Give me the latest iPhone, give me the latest, iPad, and give me the latest washer and dryer and that type of thing. And, we're demanding it. And I find ironic you're blaming big oil that they're not even needed. Just stop using all these products, the demand goes away. But like the airports keep growing, data centers keep growing. So at the same time, we're talking out both sides of our mouth. How dare you? And then we keep building something bigger.
And
Bigger
oil,
airports, bigger planes, and
and oil keep growing. The demand is growing every time, and the projection, the predictions to grow to 116 barrels a day, million barrels a day.
yes. Now the interesting thing, like I say, we have a lot of products and fuels we didn't have 200 years ago, but are they going to be around another 200 years? Probably yes. 1,000 years, 2,000 years from now, I don't know about that. So we definitely, if we want to maintain that supply of products that allows us everybody to have an iPhone, we best focus on finding a substitute for oil to keep that supply chain of products going. Because other than that, if we run out of oil, we're automatically back to the 1800s. Those all the products in our daily lives they all start disappearing. They become in short supply. So we want to focus on efficiencies and conservation. Definitely do not want to waste any of it. It's extremely valuable. But like I say, if we get rid of oil, we're going to rely on wind and solar. Duh, that can't happen because there'll be nothing to electrify. If you don't have any iPhones to charge, what do you need electricity for?
Is a necessary electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. And Ronald, thank you for your participation on IPCR last week. 46 countries represented in the event.
Fantastic.
More than 200 people present. Well, we didn't have enough time to a good conversation, a good discussion, debate but was funny, was
Very
important to be there.
I wanted
Thank you so much.
wanted to give them a quiz. But that's after a lot of discussions.
Yeah. But was good because we brought some parts of discussion that they are not, let's see, familiar with this.
Yes, exactly. Very good.
Thank you so much. It was a
Armando,
pleasure talking
you have
to
a
you
great
today.
day. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Take
Great
care.
day. Thank you.